Today we're doing one of our People and Projects episodes. I'm in the studio with James Laing, who works at Stantec. I'm here on Gubbi Gubbi country in Queensland in Caboolture, and I know you, James, because you did a fantastic presentation at the Asia Pacific Bike Riding Conference. And what I really liked about that was that you said, this is what we're aiming for, which is bikes at the top and pedestrians at the top and then the cars at the bottom. But what we end up with is 4 lanes of car on both sides and a patchwork of bicycle path. It completely symbolized my experience of what I see and read. I've actually wanted to get you on the show ever since then. Perhaps you could say where you're calling from and what made you interested in this whole area? Perhaps it'd be good to explain what your job is.
My name is James Laing and I'm a cycle planner and designer. I specialise in active travel in everything I do. I'm in the city of Melbourne at the moment. I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I've been here about 6.5 years. So before that I was in London. Before London I was in America. I really got into the active travel side when I was in London. I worked at Transport for London for several years and I was a transport engineer there. When I started there, a lot of my early work in London was transport engineering, and we weren't really talking much about cycling and walking then. TfL's motto was keep London moving, and that really related to cars and buses. That's actually really helped me in my career because I design intersections for cars and keeping traffic going and stuff. I understand how that works. I understand the importance, when that should be prioritised and when it shouldn't. And I think when you come into the active travel space, if you've got that balance and that understanding and you really get the trade-offs, I think it makes you pretty good as a practitioner, that you can talk all the languages that you need to talk. So I probably got really excited about active travel. I reckon it was around 2011, 2012. The first cycle superhighways went in 2010 back in London, and they were pretty much just a lick of blue paint, a couple of metres wide, but it was reallocation of road space, and that was huge. There wasn't any protection at the time. It was all pretty much on road. A lot of issues with cars turning left across the riders and what have you. It was good, it was there, and it was exciting, and then we started upgrading to the more the protected bike lanes, etc. And while this was all going on, Healthy Streets came in as well, which really helped me develop my skills, because what Healthy Streets then did, it used to be this situation, which we've got in Australia at the moment. You'd do some modelling, and modelling would say, oh, that's going to be bad for car capacity, so no, we can't do that, and that would be the end of conversation, even internally at TfL. When Healthy Streets came along, and this was all fueled by Boris Johnson, who was a mayor at the time, and Ken Livingstone had done some decent work before that, then it would be like, okay, so the modelling doesn't really work, but what are the other benefits? What are the health benefits? What else are we getting out of it? Placemaking, the streetscape designs, can people cross the road safely as a shade shelter, all these kind of other things we started talking about, and we started looking at designs a lot more holistically. And then the modelling was still important, but it got watered down, and you could have an argument and you could still get some stuff going, which is pretty good. So this whole everything's on modelling started disappearing a little bit, and that really set the scene for some excellent stuff that's gone in, especially in London in the past 10, 15, 20 years, and that started happening in other areas of the country as well.
What inspired you? Did you ride a bike when you were a kid? Was that a major catalyst for why you wanted to get into active transport in the first place? Or?
I think we all did, didn't we? Yeah, I mean, I was 7 and I used to live in a small town in Penrith in the Lake District where I'm from, and I'd be riding all the way across town to go and see my mates when I was 7 or 8, walking, riding to school, obviously bombing around with no helmets on, and I don't recall ever feeling unsafe. I even can't remember if I did it on the footpaths or the road. I'm not even sure where I rode. I just rode where I wanted to ride. I was just having fun and footloose fancy free as a 7-year-old. Always ridden a bike, always enjoyed it, and where I'm from is a big mountain bike area as well, so I enjoyed doing the mountain bike riding as I got a little bit older. Always done that, but professionally I fell into engineering. I took a really weird route into engineering and realised I was pretty good at it, self-taught a lot of the stuff I was doing, and then when I started getting into this walking and cycling, there was just something inside that felt more rewarding doing it than what I'd been doing before, and you saw the benefits on the street. You were creating opportunities for people to leave their house and improve mental health and physical health. I used to walk an hour when I lived in London to the office rather than get the tube or bus. You'd clear your head. It was a nice way to walk home. I just really got into it there, and I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. But when I came to Australia, I was still this transport engineer, I guess, who'd done bike design, so I saw a bit of a niche there, and I was like, well, if I can help grow this space, I should. So I really started to focus firmly on that, and it's just grown and grown since then. I'm really glad it has, because it was always the way I wanted to go. I can just focus on what I want to do, so I've been very lucky in that regard.
It really makes a difference when you are doing what you actually enjoy. When I saw you give the presentation at the Asia Pacific Bike Riding Conference, conference in Brisbane earlier on this year, you put up one picture which is that pyramid. So it starts with, I think, walking and then cycling and then buses and trains.
The hierarchy.
Yes, the hierarchy. And then you showed the other image, which was the outcome. You did it before and after. It would be great to explore what is it that happens, in your opinion, between the ideal and the policies and the strategies that a lot of places have got in place and the outcome, which is a lot of roads.
I'll speak to what I know about and believe, but there's so many levels. So I think one of the first levels is it's actually an institutional barrier. We did a big project with the Amy Gillette Foundation when they were still flying along a couple of years ago. We did a kind of environmental scan and we looked at the state of the industry and tried to work out what the barriers were to implementing good cycling infrastructure. And it came out of that one of the biggest barriers was actually this internal barriers of people in our own organisations. I've got a graduate in my team, William Simmons, and he did an excellent thesis on the barriers to active travel, and it came up with pretty much the same result. Part of that was this institutional barrier. I can go to any of the big organisations, I can go to engineers at local government, state government, all consultancies, and they've all got this issue, whereas there might be somebody like me and other people like me, but even their civils team, their design teams, etc., they might not have the experience designing this stuff. They've had experience of the governments and the clients saying no, so they just assume everyone's going to say no, so they don't fight for it, they don't push for it. They're not just doing this stuff automatically. There's not enough of us that are skilled enough to get across every project and make sure it's embedded in. I've sorted it out for my own organisation. We're all on the same page, but I'll go to clients and they'll say no, and they'll be saying no because they think state government's going to say no. So the next level is anything even at a local government level often requires state government approvals, and I'll give you an example of that. And I don't know if it's the same everywhere, but say you want to put a modal filter in on a residential street.
Just explain what modal filter is.
Essentially, it's just not allowing through traffic on a road. So people can still walk and cycle up and down the road, but cars can't go from one end to the other. They have to go around, take another route round. But putting one of these in is actually quite challenging to do because it's generally seen as a major traffic control item, so something that needs approval by a state government agency, and that could be a pretty long process because people might look at it and they go, where's the traffic going to go? Is that going to impact our intersections? I tried to do one in London once, I remember, the Transport for London, and our modelers at the time said, well, if you do that, all the traffic's going to go onto our road. And I was like, yeah, that's where it's meant to be. That's what moving to place, that's what it's all about. Yeah, we've built this road to move traffic, keep London moving. Go boys. Yeah, and they said, yeah, but that's going to put too much pressure on our intersection. That's our problem. This is a local road, a council road. Basically what they were saying is, we're happy to turn a blind eye to the traffic rat running on this road. So that's the same pretty much everywhere. It's a big problem. Because of the approval process and because of all these steps you've got to go through to get something so simple as maybe putting a big plant pot in the middle of a street so cars can't get up and down, but people can walk, cycle safely anywhere to schools, shops, local activity centres. This is a problem everywhere in the world. Because the approvals process takes so long, clients will assume their state government agency, whoever that might be, are going to say no to this. So therefore they don't take it any further. I've heard this first-hand off engineers where they'll say, oh, we'll put some speed humps in the road to slow traffic and discourage traffic. And I was like, well, why do you want that? Put a modal filter in, put this big plant pot in the middle of the street so cars can't go up and down. And they say to me, well, the community hasn't asked for that. And I'll be like, well, what did they ask for? The engineer in question, he said to me, well, they asked for less traffic. There's too much traffic and the cars are going too fast. So my response is, well, they did ask for a modal filter. Your interpretation of getting rid of traffic, slowing it down, is to put speed humps in, hoping that's going to discourage traffic. So there's that disconnect as well. People are only thinking of this typical, we open the guidance, this is what the solution is, and it is just guidance. Guidance is there to help. As an engineer, you're meant to go and think and judge and look at everything site specific, but we have this issue where a lot of people, they're too scared of the risk of doing that. If you go away from the guidance and do something else and interpret it a different way, if you get challenged on that, you're going away from what this document says. It's not a standard, it's guidance. Everyone treats guidance like standards. It's a huge issue. So people don't want to take the risk of going away from what it's saying, so they'll just end up going down this standard approach. So there's an internal barrier, there's a fear of the next level up saying no, and then even when you get to the next level up, I'm not sure the ministers and what have you are getting the right advice. There'll be people in groups that will say no to certain things, or they say we can't do that, we can't have that reduction in traffic capacity, whatever it might be. But then you might have a really good positive minister that might be saying something like they want to do this and this is the policy, but they're not even really getting to hear from the right people, they're not getting the right information because it's getting shot down before it even gets to them. One of the states has got a fantastic policy about getting away from worrying about modelling, capacity, etc. But when people try and implement it, it gets down to this level where the certain groups start looking at the capacity and they want to see the modelling. The policy just falls apart because it's not supported. I'm not sure it's going high enough up the chain. And if I can go back to my London example, when the modelling fell apart, but we could start talking about the other benefits like healthy streets, etc., somebody would listen. I'm not sure we're even getting that conversation at that high level, and we're getting shot down too early. And now there's this fear at all levels. Don't do this because they'll say no. Don't do this because they'll say no. And it's going all the way down to consultant level, local government level. I don't even know how you unpack that, what I just said. There's so many avenues.
What really struck me, and this is what I've come across several times, is that the modelling appears to be quite incomplete. I went to a presentation recently at a conference, and there was somebody who had a model, and it included all the walking and cycling infrastructure as part of the modelling. I don't know if the modelling is just a very dated form of modelling, whether it's overestimating how many cars will go there. I don't know enough about the modelling. Do you know much about the modelling processes?
I know enough to say it's important, but I know enough to say that I've done trials where a model has been done and the results of the model are nowhere near as bad as they thought it was going to be, and the trial has proven that. Everybody thought there was going to be carnage. Vehicles just disappeared, just stopped making that trip. People changed habits, they changed the way they travelled. The traffic just disappeared. Models don't really take traffic evaporation into account very well, is my understanding. I'm not a modeller. I did a project in Victoria where we took out a arterial road, took out a lane of traffic, put a pop-up bike lane in. I'm pretty sure if we modelled that, that wouldn't have gone ahead. It was done under COVID, so we had the business case to do it, and it's been a massive success. The world hasn't ended. I'll always be a fan of trial over model, but you can't not have modelling. You've got to have something. You've got to have some mechanism to try and work out what's going to happen. There's so many different degrees of modelling as well. I just think it has to be part of a conversation. It doesn't have to be the only conversation, and it doesn't have to be the most dominant person in the room. There's plenty of other benefits that we should be selling. What's the vision? What do you want this place to function as? Do you want people to be walking down the street? Do you want people to be spending time on the street? Do you want them to be able to cross the road easily? Do you want a nice calm environment, a vibrant place? What do you actually want? And you've got to stand up for that. And maybe it's a bit too lopsided at the moment, but it'd be good to actually get a model on here that can speak to it better and see their understanding, because we've got fantastic modellers in our organisation. I have this kind of mini debate with them all the time. They accept, there's limitations. Nothing beats a good trial, in my opinion, because I'm yet to see a model that really supports a good active travel outcome. It's only there to show that it's not going to work most of the time, and that's because our streets are already full of traffic.
This was my question, because the modelling, it seems then, is from the 1970s, and it's just had more and more iterations where everything is about the car. Now there are all these policies, guidelines saying we've got to do more active transport, we've got to do movement in place, and it seems that the traffic modelling is only looking at cars effectively, but it's also not including the externalised costs of people being unwell, of the impact on businesses, all these other human experiences it doesn't seem to be including. As you say, I should get a modeller on and discuss that.
That's what business cases are for. That should be bringing a lot of that story, and it's storytelling. We don't do enough to tell the story. We're straight into the analytics, straight into the data. What's it going to mean? Bringing that story into that early business case and getting that kind of support and that excitement is obviously key, and a lot of business cases maybe don't do that. It's jumping straight into impacts rather than what you're trying to achieve as an outcome.
Recently I was at a transport meeting with my local council. It was an open event, so I could go. It was, okay, so let's look at different scenarios, and it was full of traffic engineers, and they went straight to the solution, but they hadn't even asked what is the outcome we're looking for. I wonder if the problem that we've got is that people are going too soon into the solution without asking what's the outcome we actually want.
I think when we're doing our planning as well, before we even get to designs, there's an issue there with people not understanding what people want. So I'll give you an example. You'll see a lot of active travel strategies, and a lot of them will have cycling, walking corridors, whatever they're going to be. This is your bike corridor, and there'll be lines on a map essentially in your municipality, and there hasn't really been much conversation with the community at that point, but you put a line on a map and you've said in the strategy, this is going to be my cycling corridor. As soon as you then try and have a conversation about developing a cycling corridor or developing a street, even if you go with the good stuff and you say, we just want to know what do you like about your street, what do you not like about your street, what keeps you awake at night. If you start having that conversation about a street where there's already a line in a document on a map, people aren't daft. There's a famous example, I won't name the street, in Melbourne where that happened, and I was at the very first consultation consultation, I was on a booth just to ask, what do you like, what do you not like about your street? And everyone just came at me, almost pitchforks. You're not taking away our parking, bloody cyclists, all this kind of stuff. And they already knew what the plan was because it's in a strategy. So that's an issue. And I feel like even when we're writing our strategies, this high level stuff when we're planning, we should be almost trying to get away from that and really engaging early, finding what keeps people awake at night. And then you'll probably find people just want to get to the local school, they just want to get to the shops, they just want to get to the church, the playground, that kind of thing. I think we focus so much on commuting and big cycle corridors, etc. And that's fantastic, and you go for that and advocate for that for sure. But there's only about 10 or 11% in any city, and this is the main cities in Australia, that cycle for commuting purposes. 90% of people will cycle for a different reason than the reasons I just mentioned. Same in regional towns as well. It's that more local riding. That's the low-hanging fruit. All the focus goes on these big lines. These are our bike corridors. So take that big line off that plan and just plot where the schools are, the churches, the playgrounds, the activity centres, and just think about, okay, so what's our strategy? We want to get more people to be able to access these places, so maybe we just say, how do we get them from this area to this area? And it might start off with some simple crossings. You might start leading down like a 30k street conversation, or just doing the Dutch approach, making it actually quite hard to drive through a neighbourhood. You know, you go around, but you're not just going in straight off the bat with protected bike lanes, parking's going, let's get into a fight, because that's what happens at the moment. Even the way we plan, in my opinion, is just fueling this, something that doesn't need to happen. We can do that differently. Before we even jump to the solutions, let's just find out, like you said, what do people want? What do they not like? And I think when we get to a consultation, so if I'm going off on a tangent here, quite often we'll go to consultation and then there'll be a bit of a petition that might come up because there's a bike corridor, which it should never ever be labelled as a bike corridor anyway. A streetscape scheme's great, whatever it might be, just improvements to the street. We often hear about this vocal minority, just a small group of people who might be opposed. And then there's a lot of people who don't comment. And that's because we maybe do a really poor job of selling the benefits to them because we haven't gone and asked them what they want in the first place. I had a project recently, it was great for cycling. The best thing about it was going to be so easy, so safe for people to get across the road, to get to their local shops, to get to a school. But you never heard any of that stuff in this petition that came up. So if people say it's difficult to cross the road and you capture that voice, then you've got something to respond to. And the cycling doesn't matter. That's a byproduct of the rest of the design. Improving the footpaths, side road crossings, just repairing footpaths, whatever it might be, getting some extra shading, putting some seats down so people can go for a walk if they're elderly or they've got some mobility impairments, and they can have a rest every 100 meters or 200 meters. Start getting their voices, wake them up. There's someone else to help you, because we do a pretty poor job with the consultation as well. We don't really sell what we're trying to do. If we can't get them other voices unlocked, it always feels like the whole community is against us, when in reality it's like 1 or 2%. Then we get into this problem, but we treat consultations like referendums. It's not a vote, it's an engagement exercise, and we listen and we adapt and we work through that. We come up with a design that works for everybody, whereas too often if we see it as a yes-no vote and we react to that, which is very frustrating.
My experience of community engagement processes, what I see is that I'm not allowed to engage. If it's not in my street, I'm not allowed to put forward ideas because it's not in my street. I see that actually they could have put in a good bicycle path, but that's not my street, so I can't do it. I can understand that they want to stop the noisy voices being there, but when you're putting in constructive feedback, I think that would be useful. I read a book, it was Veronica O'Davis, I want to try and get her on the show, and she was talking about too often going out to the community means you go forward and then you go, would you like the driveway moved 10 meters to the right or left? It's that level. It feels like it's all done and you don't have any option to say anything. Too often it feels like a tick box exercise. I think what that does is it means that, well, why would I bother saying anything? Because really you're actually not interested.
I agree, and I talk about this all the time, when to engage. I would say 80% of my designs, if not higher, I'll do a design and someone will make a beautiful picture of it and then they'll go to community and they'll go, what do you think of this? This is what we want to do. So of course you're going to be defensive. One, it's just change. If your life's okay, if you're quite happy with status quo, why would you want change unless you're really passionate and you feel there's an issue out there? And so if someone just puts a design in your face and says this is what we're going to do, even if it's beautiful, people are thinking that's a year of construction outside of my house. There's all sorts of issues with it. You've got to have a response to a problem. You've got to have a response to what people have said they like and they don't like. Now they might not love your interpretation of what they've said, they might like your design response, but at least you've got something to answer and you've unlocked many voices. You're not just going after one targeted group. Like, I'm an advocate, I love the work the bugs do, it just blows my mind how much effort they put into it. But it's also a problem sometimes because it can become a little bit tunnel vision. You can't just talk about the cycling all the time. You've got to get other people on board as well. And it might not be perfect, but you can make really good improvements if you just zoom out and just think about the holistic nature. And if you accept people still have to drive places, that's okay. We often see, why should I give up my car to do it? No one's going to ask you to give up your car. I would never do design that would do that. Even if I put a blockage in the middle of the road, I'd be doing it in a place where it's easy to get round, it's inconvenient. You might have about an extra 30-second journey sitting in your comfy car listening to the radio, but that's okay for me. But we get too focused, and designers get too focused as well, and I've been guilty of that. I've got a bit too passionate on certain stuff, but I've definitely, as I'm getting older, I've mellowed out. I've been more holistic. I'm trying to really engage people early, bring everybody to the party, make sure there's something for everybody. Even how do you get out your car safely? If we're pushing the parking out to put a bike lane in, everyone goes, great, just flip the parking, just put the bike lane there, the cars are here, the bike lane, just flip it. That's all well and good in theory, but there's people who live in them houses, elderly people, that then need to get out of their car. So they need the space to safely get out of their car, not into live traffic. There's a lot of things you've got to consider. You've got to think about everybody.
The themes that I've pulled out from the conversation are that we actually need to be broader in our vision, to ask people earlier, what do you want? How can we make this good? Rather than come in, this is my solution, and what would you like tweaked on that? So you're a bit up in arms about that, where you're the problem. There's something about the tunnel vision, which is a problem, and also too prescriptive.
There is another side of that coin. I'm talking a lot about local level interventions and what have you. And a lot of that is because we don't seem to have much political will. So if you go back to like London when the cycle superhighways went in, it's a terrible name, but anyway, that's what it was at the time. They've changed it now to cycleways because you shouldn't be saying it's a superhighway. It's not a road. It's a place where people are riding along with kids and just smiley faces. There was a political will there. So if you're going to put these lines on the maps I was talking about earlier, if you've got the will, you've got the budget, it's going in, the mayor's saying that's going in, that's okay. And then this engagement thing, I think that's fine to do that. A council in Victoria recently who does have the will on a street, they did engage. They said, right, this is what we're going to do with the street. We are putting a bike corridor in. They maybe didn't need to frame it like that. I'm not even sure if they did. But what they said, you've got three kind of choices. Okay, you can either keep your parking, you can keep your trees, or you can keep your access. So what they were basically saying is we can narrow the footpaths, take some trees out, put a protected bike lane in. We can take your parking out, put a protected bike lane in, or you can keep your parking, keep your trees, and we put one of these modal filters, a planter, whatever it might be, in the middle of the road to stop the through traffic, and then slightly longer access for you to get to your house, but you can keep your parking. So they gave them three options, and they said this is how you shape it, but something's going to go in. There is a good way to engage when you've got the political will and you know you need to get something in, and it's a strategic cycling corridors. You can try and force something through, but you've still got to get early engagement, you've still got to listen. But I think we struggle to definitely get something in, so then we have to really come from the bottom and get this community support and unlock the silent majority voices and stuff to really help us. But that doesn't mean that on a bigger corridor, if the politics are there and the money's there, we can't still just plough ahead. You still need to consider everybody, but it's more of an engagement exercise then. Tricky space, there's a bit of both.
So we're coming up towards the end of time. If somebody was, say, in the community, so my friend has two little boys and she's stuck at home and she doesn't have a lot of money, she doesn't have a lot of time, doesn't have a lot of resources. What's something that she can do perhaps to get her kids, her little boys, riding more safely in the local community, or what's something that she can do?
I'm a dad of two young boys, and I can speak to something I did recently as an advocate, not as a professional. I went to my local primary school where my two boys go, and I started talking about school streets. A school street is big in the UK and other places as well, where pick up and drop off the street, there's no traffic allowed in the street essentially. The streets are turned into a play space, if you like. And I was talked about this. I said I think this would be a great idea, so I started advocating for it and speaking to them about it. And then because I've got connections at council, I started speaking to council. I spoke to a local MP, I met the mayor for a coffee, and in February we're actually going to be closing the street to traffic for 3 Fridays in February, which is fantastic, and it's going to be a really big event. So it's not quite the answer. Because I had the contacts, that's a lot easier for me to do, obviously. You can join local bicycle groups, you can speak to the school, you can form an alliance with other parents. I believe everything should come around schools, that they should be just the epicenter of our communities, and that's how we're going to see big improvements. If we just focus on schools, it's hard to say no to a school. So you can chat to other parents, form alliances, advocate together as a unit, and most councils will listen. Most councils councils will want to hear gripes you've got. As a consultant, it's a bit easier, but I would just say for us, we need to engage with people early and really talk to people, really understand their issues. But for the public, it depends how passionate you are. Most people will grumble about stuff, but they won't do anything about it. You need strength in numbers, really. You can come and chat to me because I'll give you free advice all day long. If it's me, I'd just be looking to align myself with people, find local groups, speak to the school, generate support, come up with ideas, and just advocate. That's not a great answer because it's hard. It's not easy to do. If you're a member of the public, you have no connections in this space, and you just want to get across the road safely, you've got to find someone like me who lives in your community or somebody similar who kind of knows a little bit and maybe can open some doors for you. One other thing, when there is a consultation, respond. Even if you don't see much, respond to it. And just as a quick example, we've done several evaluations, several consultations. I'm going to give an example. There's one where there was like 1,500 people looked at a design online. About 200 people responded to it that I know of. There's about 1,300 people who didn't say anything. They weren't offended by this design. It made no difference to them, positive or negative. All you hear is this voice of 200 people. If you don't care, in my mind, that's a positive. If you don't think the world's going to end, you'll accept the change, you'll roll with the punches. It's fine, we don't care. If this improves more people riding, I don't ride a bike, that doesn't matter. But it's not really affecting where I park my car, where I walk, all that stuff. People look at stuff and go, we're not bothered. And if you're not bothered, then that voice never gets captured. But if you're not bothered, that should definitely be seen as a positive. Anyone who's good at consultation, any council officers, they should be trying to latch onto that and they should sell that point. This is a positive. Look, most people don't care if this goes in or not. Fantastic. That's 85% of the community don't care if we do this, so let's just go and do it. But we're not doing that. Make sure you do respond to your consultations, etc., because a lot of people don't.
I definitely agree. Say somebody's in transport planning. So we have a couple of new bike lanes. If I had a 10-year-old child, I would not want them to ride a bike on that place. It's the green line and they have people in cars going left across the green line. And to me, that just says that's a bad design for a bike lane and there's no protection at all. It's your pretty standard, I call it a death wish bike lane, those ones. For somebody who is designing those sorts of cycle lanes, what can you suggest that they can do so that they stop doing that and come up with some better solutions?
We call that the left turn hook, the left turn going across the bike, and it is one of the hardest things. It's one of the leading causes of accidents between people driving and riding. Obviously, if it's signalised on paper, it's a lot easier because you can separate the movements in time as well as space. You still want the protected bike lane. The painted one, forget about it, because a road rule will actually say a vehicle's allowed in a bike lane, so unless you protect it, the car's squeezing you out regardless. If you can separate it in time, that's fantastic. And then it just comes down to a traffic flow capacity question again, and we go to our good old friends the model to tell us why that won't work a lot of the time. But then it's the uncontrolled stuff that's really difficult. A lot of things we do, I think, in the design, we have quite big curb turns radius. Vehicles can usually turn in pretty quickly. They can turn in and just stay in the right lane when they turn. We try to push away from that now. So if I'm doing a protected bike lane, I will try and push that protection as deep into that intersection as possible, so a car can still get round but gets around slowly, so they can't fly around that corner anymore, so we're really slowing that turn down. A waste truck can still get round, but yeah, they'll probably use the whole side road to turn into, but that's okay. That's once a week. There's no point designing for something that's only going to make a movement once a week, is there? So trying to slow it down as much as possible is one way you can try and mitigate it. Banning the turn's the obvious one, like just make it a one-way street going out as much as possible. Try and close as many side roads as possible. If there's a wider road, another connector people can get to, and it's not too much of an impact on their journey times, or it's accepted, then nothing better than closing the roads, especially in high risk ones where you might be joining a busy connector. If you could do the setback, if you've got the room, you don't often have the room, especially when you're trying to retrofit a lot of places we are, but if you can actually do a setback so one vehicle can actually store and then you've got a raised crossing for the riders going across and one vehicle can then give way as they go across, that's fantastic. And there's no excuse in any growth areas why that design isn't put in. In fact, it's just nuts if people don't design it that way. But a lot of the work we do and I do is retrofitting. There's a building on the corners, you can't do that kind of thing. You can put the green paint in, you can put VMS signs in, you can slow the speed down of the road in general, but try and slow that left turn down as much as you can. There's still going to be accidents though. It's the nature of the offset to the protected bike lane. Unless you can remove that conflict, and it's not so much even the left turn, sometimes it's the right turn, because they're just looking for a gap in traffic. And if it's a busy road and that gap doesn't happen very often, as soon as that gap's there, they're gone. Now that's become a bigger problem nowadays because now we've got e-scooters, e-bikes. A lot of people are going a bit faster, and a lot of people who might not be as competent are going a bit faster. Some states even have a road rule issue. It would say that if a vehicle's turning and they're indicating to turn, then a rider should give way to someone who's turning in. So then there's that grey area of have they started their turn, what's going on there. But then there's another road rule that says you shouldn't cross a traffic lane until that lane is clear. Now, we're not getting too technical. If you've got dashed lines going through the intersection, it's still technically a bike lane. The driver should give way to the rider because they are crossing a traffic lane. But that goes against the other road rule. Really, that needs sorting out. Every time you ask me a question, I just feel like I go into a rabbit hole of stuff that's going on all over the place.
It's great because one of the things I have been learning through these podcasts is how complex it is. Because I know in the community you go, well, why would you do that? And why would you do that? And why wouldn't you do this? And why wouldn't you do that? What I've been learning through speaking with so many different people now is, gee, this is complex. There's lots of legacy issues. There's lots of perspectives to take on board. There's the history. I really like the fact that you bring these, well, actually quite conflicting and more nuanced perspectives. I love that. All right, we're going to wrap up. Any closing thoughts, closing remarks, any final suggestions, ideas, anything else you would like to add?
One, I just want us to be just calm and just be a bit more peaceful with each other, just as members of the public of everything. The hardest thing in my job is to try and dampen down this us versus them, drivers, riders, all this kind of thing. There's a lot of criticism of both groups, and they're just people choosing a certain mode of transport to go on their journey, and people will make, there's a judgment, people will make mistakes, especially social media now. I see everyone's on a camera on their bike, and the slightest thing that a driver might do, people are all over them. And yes, sometimes these people are idiots that do this. Other times people are just unclear about what to do, or they've made a slight error, or someone just comes so fast that we're all at fault. We're all kind of responsible for each other's safety. And I just think it's gone too far. And I think we as a riding community, yes, course, report bad behaviour, call it out, but I think it's gone a bit too far, and I don't think it's helping. I think we need to really start getting to a point where we're just people who use a mode of transport for each trip. I might be trying to be a sport rider, bombing up Beach Road, and then the next day I'm pootling along on the footpath taking my kids to school. I'm the same person. I'm just a human being, and it's like road rage magnified. I think we can all do just a bit more just to try and calm that and not attack each other, because there's no need. You need cars, you need bikes, you need feet. You need everything, so let's just try and dispel that. And the other thing is just give a little bit of love to the designers and the planners and stuff. I'm never going to design a perfect project. I might know in my head how to do it. It's never going to happen. There's always going to be trade-offs. There's always going to be things that are getting watered down. There's always going to be budgetary constraints, but we're doing the best we can. And it's not so much the consultants, I'd say even more at local government level. There's great people in local government. There's fantastic people in state government. They're doing the best they can, and they're easy to pile on them. And I know people who've left local government because they were just, I'm getting no thanks for anything I'm doing. I'm trying so hard, but I'm not getting the support of industry. I'm not getting the support of politics, but they're the ones that just get a punch bag for the public. So just give a little bit of thought to them, because there's some wonderful people, and you know who they are, and they're trying really, really hard. And yeah, we're very easy to criticise, so let's try and not do that, please.
Great word to end off. Just generally in life, everybody is just trying to do the right thing from whatever it is perspective that they come from. Well, I have very much enjoyed the conversation. As I said, I love the more nuanced perspective, speaking to the complexity and challenges and ways that we can keep a larger view on what is the outcome we want. And I think that's often missing from the conversation. So I've really appreciated the whole perspective. Thank you so much, James.
Thank you. You're welcome.